Hi everyone, Regina Lossell here with the Light Vitality Group. I apologize, we're starting 2 minutes late today, and I apologize if there is any interference with the web connection for some reason. I seem to be experiencing some internet issues. So if I freeze on you, I apologize. I hope my face doesn't look too ridiculous in those moments. But thank you so much for joining me today for day 2 of this year's first Light Wellness Experience workshop. Uh, Yesterday, we briefly went over what type of things we're going to be discussing. And you know that we are going to be reviewing the workbook that hopefully you have already filled out in previous workshops and taking a little bit more of a deeper dive into some of that education and how that can be best applied. So today's session, Circadian Health 101, typically I give that high level information, which we'll review inside our workbooks, right? But I'm going to give you a little more information that is particularly uh, important in terms of how our circadian rhythms form, when they form, and what we need to do to make sure to keep them strong in the infancy of their development. Right. So, as you know, circadian rhythms account for roughly 90%. It says over 80% of our genes follow a day to night rhythm. We now know that it's over 90%. Right. And so that it governs everything from our sleep wake cycles to certain hormonal responses to digestive function and metabolism. It impacts our cardiorespiratory system, right? When our peak expiratory flow is, and whether or not our heart can maintain a rhythm and avoid arrhythmias. So there are so many incredible things that our circadian rhythms do for us. The primary hormones, as you know, are this balance between melatonin and cortisol. Melatonin helps us to fall asleep, cortisol helps to make us more alert and awake. And having an improper balance in either of those can be very vital to our well-being, from kind of sugar and insulin factors to depression and kind of mood stabilizing, if you will, or destabilizing. And it's so important to understand, right, that those wellness pillars all rest on the foundation of circadian health. But what you may not know is that circadian health, everyone has these questions, right? People don't know when they really come into function, how to best take care of them. And as you learn throughout the workshop, we do that through a number of different environmental cues. We do that with light. We do that with core body temperature. We do that with feeding patterns, right? And these 3 primary biomarkers for circadian health happen in our gestation, right? Our mothers. Right? We, as mothers, we set the rhythm for our child before they're even born. And so it's so important for expectant mothers or parents who are planning to start a family to make sure that you have your circadian rhythm intact so that you can prepare your body and create a healthy homeostasis and a healthy home for the child that you are going to be creating, that you are currently creating, and that you are bringing into this world. And to make sure that the space, the environment that you bring a child into the world into is prepared to take over in their regulating of their circadian alignment, because once they come out of you, you're no longer responsible for maintaining it for them. So how does this happen? This happens because during week 7 of gestation, our retinal ganglion cells are formed. We've talked in the past about the IPRGCs, those intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells that receive light, and then that light signal is sent to the brain to create physiological uh, actions inside our body. Um, this is significant, right? I'm not getting into the, is a child alive and, is terminating a pregnancy. I don't want to have that conversation. This is strictly from an anatomical perspective that the photoreceptors in our eyes, or at least the cells that create the photoreceptors, are beginning to form at week 7, in many instances before you even know that you're pregnant. Um, by week 19 to 20 of gestation, that 20-week mark where it all gets really real, right? And you start to show, um, so melatonin begins binding to your suprachiasmatic nucleus. As you may know through other workshops, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN, is where melatonin is produced. It holds the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus holds the pineal gland. The pineal gland is what is responsible for producing melatonin and regulating. So the SCN is so important, and melatonin begins binding to the SCN during weeks 18 and 19. So now at 20 weeks, you're getting into your second trimester, and your child has the photoreceptors that they need in order to receive light signals, and their brain is starting to process and function the melatonin that is being provided to them through your own body. Now, by 24 weeks gestation, just 4 weeks later, your child's circadian rhythm is completely formed, right? So they are taking on all of those environmental cues during the second trimester. My personal opinion and stance, again, I'm not a doctor. You'd have to talk to your doctor about these things, and there's still so much research to be done and so little known. But there is a lot of evidence out in the world right now indicating that at roughly 24 weeks, if a child is born preterm, they have a much higher potential for survival rate if they are born at 24 weeks or later. The mortality rate goes up significantly if a child is born before 24 weeks. And I think the earliest survival that we've seen on record to date, even with all the medical advancements, is somewhere between like 21 weeks and a few days gestation. But it's touch and go. It's really tough. And when you know what you know about circadian health, that the circadian function really starts to take effect between weeks 18 and 24, it makes so much sense that a child has a much higher survival rate if they're born after 24 weeks. And with advanced technology, maybe even after 22 weeks. So for all of you mothers out there who are preparing your little ones to enter into the world, create a healthy home, right? In terms of the lighting cues and the thermal cues that your child needs for melatonin production, for core body temperature stabilization, right? These are such important factors to maintaining and regulating circadian health. And for yourself, so that you can start to imprint those rhythms on your child and help maintain their rhythms for them. And then after about 1 to 4 weeks of entering into the world, that's really when their bodies start to take on those environmental cues of their own. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Because we know that we need to be receiving light 3 to 4 days out of the week. So depending on what type of environment you've created for your child, it might take a little bit longer for their circadian rhythm to kick in. We tend to keep our children indoors for the first month, right? Because we're helping them build their immune system. We're scared that, as a new parent, especially first time parents, you're afraid of, letting the child out unless you have a safe space in the back, allergies, pathogens, germs, like protect their little bodies. But one of the best ways you can protect their bodies is to get them natural light within the first 4 weeks of being born and entering into this world, because they are no longer receiving their circadian cues from you. They need to be able to establish them for themselves. And those first few months of development are so critical. The first few years are so critical, right? So get them as much healthy light as you possibly can. So remember, as we review through our book, the primary solution to circadian alignment is a very specific spectral content within natural daylight. That's why it's so important to get natural light. Look, I'm doubting, right? I've got some dappled light on me right now. And you want that. Right. I think it's their eyes, their rods and their cones are not fully developed to the point where they're able to see clearly, but their IPRGCs are, active and functioning and ready to take on the challenge of making sure that their body maintains a certain homeostasis and a certain rhythm. For parents who do wind up having their child preterm, it is so important to understand that most hospital environments do not have a control protocol for cycled lighting. Cycled lighting is when you are able to adjust the brightness or the dimness on a regular basis, and also to be able to alter the color temperature, right? And as we'll review tomorrow, and you already know that color temperature, or more specifically, the spectral content inside that color temperature, is the kind of primary factor or catalyst for being able to entrain and maintain circadian regulation. So know that if you are entering into a NICU situation, that you are going to have you're going to need a much more strategic plan in order to protect your child's circadian health so that you can give them their best fighting chance. If you are already aware that you may be delivering preterm, or maybe you've already scheduled a birth or a C-section, or a natural birth versus a C-section, understand that it's important to maybe have a set of guidelines set up for when you enter into that NICU environment. Ask your nurses and your doctors in what ways you're going to be able to control the lighting in that space, if any. Ask if you're allowed to bring in your own supplemental lights. Ask what type of shading devices they're going to need, because shading the child during the day is going to be just as critical, or more particularly at night, is going to be just as critical as getting them the right kind of light during the day. And they're going to be sleeping a lot. Their bodies are going to be fighting. They're going to be tired. They might be in pain. I know that when my son was in the NICU, we were in the NICU for 7 months. Which is a very extended stay. And there were moments where when we had to be moved away from natural daylight for extended periods of time, and he was absolutely miserable. It was a very significant and definitive change in his ability to function in everything from his heart rhythms and his oxygen saturations to his ability to eat and to pass bowel movements. He had heart arrhythmias. I mean, it was a hot mess for a little while, and we were able to get him moved back to a daylit area where we had more control of the spectral content of the light he was receiving during the day. So I just want you to understand that if you do end up in a situation like that, it is very important to have a lifestyle under light game plan, if you will. So some tips for the road, because remember, we're keeping this very short and sweet. if you think you're going to end up in a NICU environment, talk to your doctors, right? Figure out what kind of lighting is available to you, whether or not you're going to have any access to controlling that light. If you don't have access to controlling the electric light, then make sure you have, or ask if you have a means to be able to bring in supplemental electric light. Try to advocate for getting near a window with eastern or southern exposure. If it's not eastern or southern exposure, then still advocate for northern or western exposure, particularly in the northern hemisphere, north of the equator. If you are watching and you're in the southern hemisphere, you're going to want eastern and northern exposure, but western or southern exposure would also still be good. Any kind of access to natural daylight. um, Ask them what type of shading devices you're going to have available to you, right? And how you might be able to apply those. And when they're doing care times in the middle of the night, try to find a way to be able to shade your child's face and block them from that light, and in order to protect their circadian health. The same concepts can be applied at home. Instead of asking your doctors, right, you are responsible for answering all of those questions. What kind of light do you have available? Is your nursery facing north, south, east, or west? And what are the directions that are going to be important for you when you are picking a room in your house, right? Again, northern hemisphere, you want eastern and southern light. Southern hemisphere, you want eastern and northern light. What kind of lighting do you have? Do you have overhead lighting? Do you have table lamps? Do you have night lights? During care times in the middle of the night when you need to feed your baby, or when you need to change your child, or if they just wake up screaming and they won't go to sleep. Remember, it is so important to be able to remove a certain spectral content and intensity of light at night. And I highly invest in everyone to purchase a light meter. We all take care of our weight, right? And our physical health and our nutritional health. So we buy cookbooks, like healthy recipes, and we buy scales in order to, test our weight. And we might buy weights or some sort of equipment in order to, keep ourselves healthy and maintain, muscle tone. Buy a light meter. It's the single most important thing you can do in order to understand how you are living your lifestyle under light. Because especially with modern technology, there are so many sources that have a high or even a moderate spectral blue content. And as we know, we need a high spectral blue content. We'll discuss those metrics in detail tomorrow, to suppress melatonin and allow us to wake up, and allow cortisol to enter into our system to keep us stimulated. And then we need to remove that spectrum during the night. And there are certain intensities of light that we'll discuss in more detail tomorrow that will help us to be able to better manage that light. And it's such a critical component to the light recipe conversation for circadian health. So remember, I hope that you're taking these tips, to heart, and that you are preparing the spaces in your home to make sure that you, as a mother, are capable of maintaining your circadian balance, so you can, and as a father, as a family, to be able to take care of each other and to take care of that little newborn, but also to make sure that your newborn has the strongest, ability to stay healthy and to grow and to thrive. You'd be surprised how much easier it is to sleep at night, from a physiological perspective, but from a psychological perspective too, when you feel confident that everything that you're doing is in order to provide the safest and healthiest environment for your child to grow and thrive in. and for you to be able to maintain that same type of balance so that you're working at your best and at your physical, mental, and emotional peaks so that you can take care of them for all of the curveballs that they throw our way. Right. So I hope that this session was helpful to you. Circadian health, so critical. If you have any questions about filling out the packet, if you missed any of the information from previous workshops, or if you are just joining us for the first time for this one, there shouldn't be a lot of people joining us for the first time this one. As I mentioned, I wasn't marketing to any new individuals. This workshop is more for the individuals who are already inside the group. So I will be dropping the guide cards for the visual recaps the visual recaps inside the guide section for today, just in case you need that extra piece of information from the workbook. And I'll drop the tips in the post or in a comment in this session's post today so that you have a very quick visual recap in that capacity as well. So thank you so much for joining me for this brief session and for talking a little bit about the types of applications that you should be aware of entering into a very specific environment type. And learning a little bit more about circadian health and its development in our infancy, and how we as parents can step up to the challenge of making sure that we're doing everything that we can to protect ourselves and to protect the children that we bring into this world. So it is Saturday. I hope you are having a lovely, lovely day. And I'll see you tomorrow when we go over Light Wellness 101 and we start breaking down those metrics that we started to touch on at the end of this session in much more detail and take, again, deeper dives into how to apply this information. So looking forward to it. Take care. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. Give us a shout out. Say, hello, what's up? How you doing? What you doing, right? And we'll see you tomorrow. All right, remember, live lighthearted.